Hey, my name's Bruce Snell. I'm with BSG International, and today what we're going to go over is workshop number 24, and we're going to be focusing on positive or negative attitude. And what we're saying is that positive or negative attitude is totally our decision. If you look at kind of where we're at in the program, we're kind of ending up to where we're really focusing in on some personal characteristics and some other stuff. And what we want to do is to step back and look at, for these first five parts, what we've done is that we've talked about the structure, we've talked about building the process, we talked about building teams, task teams. We've looked at, in order to improve the organization, we have to define the systems, the process, and then we have to have tools for our people, those base skills to help us build that business infrastructure. Where we're at right now, we're trying to bring it together now, putting together the personal side of the deal in regards to what can we do as individuals or what can we do as managers in order to help pull this thing off. Because remember, the majority of the stuff and the resistance that we're going to get is in the fact that it's just change. No matter if we change little or a bunch, it's still change and we still resist change. So today's class is going to focus on mainly our attitude, and we're going to step back and look at it. That what we are saying is that you can either be positive or negative, and that it's totally your decision. One of the things in the class outline we had talked about is that really you have more control than you can imagine over how you feel and how you project yourself to others. And literally we can turn to where we can turn a bad thing or a bad experience into a positive, whether we're saying that we can't do anything about it, but let's learn how to drop it and move on and then not to let it become a part of our life. Okay, now let's look at page one. Page one, we're talking about, it's called Our Decision. And it says, your decision, you have a good day or bad day. It's totally your decision. And what we're saying is that when I first started doing this stuff, I thought that somebody had said something kind of similar to that. I thought it was ridiculous until I actually tried it. Literally, it's up to you. You can have a good day or a positive day, or I'm sorry, a good day or a bad day. You can be positive or negative. It's totally up to you. But the thing that's influencing us is all the majority of the negative stuff that's hanging around in us, not only in the office, but in the reinforcement in the media, but so from where we're growing up, and then all of a sudden we're taking this stuff home with us. We're saying here is that start off the day. The first 45 minutes of the day sets the tone for the rest of the day. So if you get up and you kind of grumpy and you don't want to get out and do something, I guarantee you the rest of your day is going to be that way. So you need to make a conscious effort, is that when you get up in the morning with a positive attitude and that you're going to have a good day. Because if you're sitting there, and what we're trying to do is help you deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with at work, and we're saying that you make that decision, you get up, you set the tone for a good day, and that is with a positive attitude, and that is with positive affirmations. And what we're saying is that it's up to you. You have that power to do that. And I would like for y'all to really think about, especially this workshop here, because this is going to help us in this transition from an informal to a formal organization in this applied business science. And if you look at number 3, it says smile. Smile in the AM is a smile in the morning improves life every day. What you're looking at is that by smiling, that, believe it or not, that starts changing and bringing up our positive side, or bringing up the energy, or bringing up enthusiasm. So really, a smile in the morning is a good way to start off. And make that a part of something. Either, I think most of us get up in the morning with our spouse or with our kids, and we're maybe kind of grumpy and don't want to go to work, and we're already setting the tone, not only for work and what our day's going to be like, but we're also contaminating, if nothing else, everybody around in the house with us. So we want to get up in the morning, look at it with a positive attitude, and look at those things that we can do to have a good day. So we're saying a smile in the AM. Get up in the morning, put a smile on. If nothing else, see your spouse and have a big smile for them and your kids. And bring it home. Problems at home and at work affecting each other. We have talked about this throughout this thing, about how what we do at home affects us at work and what we do at work affects us at home. So what we're doing is that we're asking us to be conscious of addressing these issues internally within these organizations and at home. And also too, what we're looking at is at how that affects us. So we're asking you to be conscious in the morning when you get up that you're going to have a good day. And if nothing else, think of that smile in the AM, and everybody will laugh with you about that. And that we want you to be conscious because you're affecting your family first thing in the morning by either having a good day or bad day. Now, what we also want to do here is that if that person is having a bad day when they get to the work, we need to be the ones to step up and show compassion and concern and help them out. Now, we're not looking at or talking about the 1% or nothing like that, but we know there's good folks and we all have good days or bad days. So be there and be supportive of one another. And if nothing else, you do what you can to make yourself happy, your family's life happy, and your workplace happy. Whether anybody else are doing it or not, you focus in on what you can do to have a good day. Now we put some things on this chart. It says, mind, freedom from fear. We call it peace. And we look at how does that thing look at work? Because it was really interesting as we were out speaking quite a bit. I think one of the students came up and made a comment. I can't even remember what we were doing or saying or something. It was at, I don't even know what college it was at. Can't remember that. Sound like my dad. He can't remember 2 days ago. If you look at it, we're saying that basically a peace of mind, getting at rest and at ease with yourself. We're saying the peace of mind, and at home we need to look at it as a positive affirmation. When we get up, is what we were talking about earlier, when we get up in the morning, get up with a good attitude, get up with a smile, and get up the fact that you're going to have a good day. No matter what happens out there, you're going to have a good day. Because too, you know, you ever notice when you're having a bad day that there's always somebody in front of you trying to get to work driving slower? Or there's somebody there that either is going to cut you off or somebody going to do this or that? If you look at it, I don't know what it is, but we have a tendency to attract these things of who and what we're thinking. And then we're saying a positive and up attitude. And at home, we need to have that agreement amongst all of us on what we're doing, how we're doing things, and really look at it as being up and positive and affirming everything that we're talking about. A gleam in your eye, and this is something that was, my grandmother used to talk about this, and she would reference somebody and say that, you know, they just have that gleam in their eye. And didn't really know what she was talking about until we got a little older. And you can see that thing or that sparkle in somebody's eye that is going somewhere, that has a mission, that has a purpose. And we're saying here is that, in effect, what that does is start promoting a calmness because you have a purpose and where you're going and you're feeling fulfilled. So look at what we're talking about here is that you really have the total control of how you feel and how you affect others. And if you look at the conviction, and we're saying here is that at work, you have to really get it into your head that this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it. And then over on the other side is that we're looking at it from being a friendly and a good person at home. Because again, at work, we're starting these affirmations, we're starting these particular personalities, and we're also trying to take it at home. It starts at home in the morning, we go to work, continue and fight through all the stuff at work, and then we're coming back home with a good attitude. Let's look at the faith. If what we're saying is that if you really want to get depressed, turn the TV on and look at what we call police blotter reporting. It'll do nothing but just suck the energy out of you. And what we're saying here is that if nothing else, you have to have faith in who we are and in yourself, that the world is not going or not crashing down. Whether anybody wants to admit it or not, we're still the best country there is out there. And what we're saying here is that to have faith in, really in mankind and in your neighbor. Because if we don't have faith, we're into that doubting thing that starts creating a whole nother misery and doom. So the faith, if you have faith and we can step back in that and believe in what we're talking about, you become a little more enjoyable. Because you ever notice what we were talking about, like that slob, that's not slob, but snob and that -1%, about how they're always just doom and gloom and everybody around them, and they're dragging everybody else down. Then we're looking at you're somewhat enjoyable to be around. You're up, you're positive, people will migrate around you. And then it says awareness and honorable. When you have honor and an integrity felt at home and in the community, you're also going to be contributing to society. We hear a lot about stuff. Look at what we can do as individuals to improve ourselves daily. And also too, by improving ourselves, we help our family out. By doing that, we also help the folks that we're working for in regards to producing their product and service. Next, let's look at, if you look at its mind, matter, and then the action. And it says power, our self-serving a purpose. Now this is very important about having a mission. Now when you're a little younger, and I think we've all kind of been through that, not necessarily when you're 19 or 21 or 25, your only mission or purpose in life is to get a paycheck and go spend it on Friday. If we're looking at here, is that as we get a little older, we start really wondering and thinking about what in the world are we here for and what's it all about. And what we're saying here is to have a purpose. Why are we here? What are we here to do to contribute? I really believe we're here to continually grow, and we're here to continually grow as an individual and continually to help and build not only our community, our family, and who we are, but have a positive impact. Because there's a lot of things out there that each individual can do just in their own home and in their own neighborhood. So we're saying here is that by serving a purpose and being secure at work, remember, we can't be secure without this mind or this peace of mind. So we're talking, again, as at home, look at that positive affirmation. And that positive affirmation, again, is looking at reinforcing all these things that you need to build to help you through the day and to help you through life. We're looking at the positive affirmation, meaning continually reinforce the positive. If you got a negative, discount it. Now we're saying sure of yourself. When you have a purpose, it seems to be that you're sure of yourself, and that is that you know where you're going. Yeah, you're going to stumble and get fingers poked in your eye and all that other stuff, but in effect, what you're going to do is that you're going to be sure of you and who you are and where you're going. That's where a lot of us are searching for after we get over 40, of what is that purpose and why are we here? Because if you look at it, we're still all working, we're still going to have to work. So what we want to do is get control of that and turn it into a positive. And if you have that and you're sure of yourself, we're looking at being a good-natured. And a good nature is nothing more than wanting everybody wanting to be around you. And then we're saying spirited and understanding. You have an enthusiasm about life, and you have an enthusiasm about just getting up in the morning and going to do something. Getting up and having, it's amazing. I've seen a lot of folks that have retired that they still have to get up and they still have to do something and they still feel like they have to contribute. So why not do it in a positive manner now? Why can't we now just look back and say, this is the situation, we got to work, So let's do it the best way that we can. And remember, when you change your attitude, you're going to change a lot of stuff that's happening to you in a negative sphere. And we're saying, you start getting the tuned in, you have an understanding. You have an understanding about who you are that in turn gives you an understanding of issues and events that are happening all around you. And it's like this calmness that comes. And then the respect of not only yourself, but the folks around you. That, and again, we're looking at gives you a whole new knowledge, because by moving in a positive direction, these walls or barriers are coming down that allows you to continue to grow. When you have all these barriers or whatever around you, you become stagnant. So this is what we're saying is that there's nothing more exciting than to have something that you're working forward to, whatever it is. And then it says gain the strength internally. The strength internally, when you're at peace with yourself and understand basically who you are and where you're going, is that your internal strength grows. And that means that, if nothing else, is that you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You don't have to talk and agree with this particular thing because everybody in the office that morning's talking about it. Or we don't have to go out there and get that Mercedes because our neighbor got it. All we're doing is that we have that internal strength and security of who we are and where we're going, is that in turn, we don't need much else. And if you look at it, the reason we need a lot of things is because we're lacking things internally. And we feel that that's going to make us happier or a better person. And then we're at home, we're more of a liking. People like to be around us. And we, in effect, as we're growing, become very honest with ourselves and with others. And honest meaning that we met this guy from this company the other day, and basically somebody made a comment, says, yeah, he's got no axe to grind. Well, if you look at it here, is that what happens as you're growing as an individual and your awareness is open up, you become very honest and you become very liking. And now let's look at assurance. As we grow individually, we're looking at the assurance of who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. That then, in effect, starts creating a warmth about you that people want to be around you. Now, remember, too, the belief. You have to have the belief not only in yourself, but of the folks around you, and you have to, in effect, trust and believe that people, in effect, are good people. Now let's look at over the belief. There's the truth. When we have the truth and we have the belief, there's a lot of good positive things that are happening. Now let's look at the action. It says patience, positive and proactive. We're looking at, we can do all this stuff, but if we don't put it into play, how good is it? That's like all this stuff that we're doing now. Good night, guys. We have gave y'all so much stuff. It's going to be in these 30 hours. Your organization could stay busy for the next 200 years. But what we're saying is just like this and just like us as an individual, we got to put it into action. And this is where we need that constant reinforcement. And we're saying here, the patience, the positive and proactive. Look at being assertive, just getting out there and making it happen, and reliable at home. Reliable from the fact is that I tell my daughter that I'm going to be at her PTA meeting and I'm there. I look at making able to make decision, reasonable, trust. If you look at manage, plan, schedule, and monitor, pleasant, friendly, and then agreement and listen. When you're able to listen, it's just amazing on what starts happening and who starts evolving around you. And we're saying here is that we really need to focus on ourselves as individuals and ourselves with a little awareness and understanding that we have the power to really do and be whatever we want to be. And I'm saying if one of the issues with our daughter, our whole goal was, she was a little behind in school. When she gets older, she'll hear this and probably don't want to talk about it. But my only goal is that if she could be happy, because I know with my experience in the workplace, if we have somebody that's happy and feeling good about themselves at work, they can do anything. And you think about that. If they're happy, that means they're content with who they are, because you can't be one without the other. So if you look at this, really what is it that's going to be success? And I was one of those guys that kind of grew up in an average household. And one of the things we thought were growing up that money was success until we made some money. Then we realized nothing had changed. And what I finally realized is that I was basically happy with who I was. And this is one of the things that we're talking about. We can be chasing all this stuff out there as artificial things to help us or make us feel better. We need to focus on the inside, and that's with the positive affirmation. And I want you to look around the folks that you have as either friends or people at work that are negative, and we want you to look at who those folks are that you're associating with. Look at are they positive? Are they negative? Are they the ones that never have a job, or they're the ones always complaining about the government or something like that, or somebody owes them something, or somebody screwed them, or whatever it is? We're talking about here, take a real good look at what's around you. And we say here down at the bottom, it's at peace, power, and patience. We go peace, power, and patience. Patience for all this stuff to happen, and the discipline. The discipline, we have to have the patience. The patience not only for ourselves, but for those folks that are around us. And if we're looking at the getting at peace with ourselves, that it's going to help us here take care of these issues that we're dealing with at work, and that we're going to be able to be a leader at work and step up and not only help our co-workers, but help our organization. Now let's look at the positive work habits. If you look at that, this is something I'd like to share with y'all. It was, somebody goes, oh, where you work X amount of hours, or you do this. If you look at it, there's really nobody I don't know that don't work hard, or they're at least working 40 hours. Now, if you look at that, it takes this much more effort to put yourself above the crowd, only this much. You know, we had talked a little earlier about the 120%. It only takes this much more to step above. And what we're saying here is that to be conscious of everything that you're doing, and if you're going to be working, most of us have to work during the week, put everything you got into it in work. Don't go in there and halfway do a half job. If the dishes aren't washed in the sink at work, wash them. But don't look and turn around and say, somebody's not doing it, I'm tired of it. Be that person, step up and make it happen. And that's kind of a simple example there. Let's look at think positively. When you're at work, because again, I don't think we're really talking any different than at work or at home. We're saying here, just think positive. And we want you to really step back and look at how many times that we so easily get off to where it's a negative. And we're looking at release the negative. When you do have a negative thing that's starting to enter in, we want you to release it, and that is let it go. If you've heard bad news, how long do you need to mope around about it and feel bad about it? Now, I'm going to ask y'all, by feeling bad and talking bad about yourself and that you made a stupid mistake or whatever, is that going to change the deal? No, it's not. All it's doing is taking the energy and the enthusiasm out of you. So when something negative happens, we want you to be able to step up and fix it. If you can't fix it and you have nothing that you can do to improve it, discount it and face it and move on. That's where we're saying forgive, forget, and forge on. Don't sit there and let it drag you down. And we're saying release the negative, let it go. But man, look how many times we just hang on to it. And be flexible, not rigid. Flexible meaning that it's not my way or the highway. If somebody's got a better idea, move with it. And if they want to sit at your desk because they're not over here, and let them sit at the desk. Be flexible. Or if they want you to do something out of your day, do it. But be flexible and help each other. Now, again, I don't want any of this folks calling me with this extreme stuff. What we're saying here, everything and what we've talked about in the basis is of moderation and being in balance and in tune. We're not talking about any of this extreme stuff. And we're saying here, believe in others. Because what's amazing, when you start believing in others, you start believing in yourself. Because whether you realize it or not, it starts making you feel pretty good. And then all of a sudden, you're feeling good about yourself. Now all of a sudden, the same audience, the same work environment, the same thing, isn't more moved to a positive tone other than a negative. And we're looking at it being a win-win. No matter what you're doing, it has to be what's right. And when we're saying a win-win, it's not necessarily negotiating a deal. Is that a win-win can be even the fact that you have an advantage over somebody. When all else fails, you have to do what's right. And because I have seen a lot of win-lose, you think you're getting them, but long-term, down the road, somewhere, you're going to pay for that. And it's either that deal or something else, but you're going to pay for it. And that's what we've talked about in that story. You're going to pay for it. You're going to get out of life what you put into it. Next is a position of strength. Oh, I'm sorry. Number 6 is change it. Don't complain about it. We're saying here, yeah, we all kind of get into that kind of maybe complaining a bit or something. What we're saying here, yeah, we got to do it. Let's move, but let's not dwell on it. And we're saying, let's change it. Don't complain about it. If you can't change it, move away from it, accept it, and move on, but don't let it drag you down, because we got enough stuff out there dragging us down. And when you're building this security and this positive work habits, in fact, you're dealing from a position of strength, because the more strength internally you get and the more positive you get, the less influence in a negative sphere is going to be around you. So in effect, you're grabbing strength and you're building yourself, and then all of a sudden the confidence and everything else starts growing. We're saying here, challenge yourself. We have to continually challenge ourselves and continue to grow. This is where we were looking at for the continuance and growth of what these organizations, as we're talking about, we call them awareness centers. And that one day, we have talked about corporate America, or the businesses are going to be the universities of tomorrow, because this is where the majority of our people, 93 to 97% are. And we're going to have to build these skills, these base skills, because somehow or another we've gotten out there and just kind of don't have them. We all need to care, not only for others, but for ourselves. We need to really focus on giving and caring. Add value to others. Wherever you're going or whatever you're doing, try to help in the office and try to add value to somebody's work, somebody's life. Always do more than ask. When you're always giving and doing, you might not, again, necessarily get it that day, but down the road it's going to pay off. And we're saying here, it only takes that much more effort. It's not a ton more, it's that much more effort. Take into account your wins. This is a strong point that I learned early in life, and that is take accounts of your wins. We have such a tendency to dwell on the negative, and we take our wins and we just discount them. We're saying if you've got a win, relish it, bring it around with you. Think of the win, think of the positives. But remember, we said we have just that tendency to discount it. Look at these things, little bitty wins. It doesn't have to be this huge big deal. Maybe the big win is that you were able to get to work on time. That's a win. That's a win that you can take every day, that you have control of. And it's what's really fascinating to me is that I get out and I can see people going to work almost running you over because they're late. And you know what's interesting? I'm willing to bet, because as many organizations I've been into, as many folks I've been involved with, they're late almost every day. They have no control over their life. And they're sitting here instead of getting up 5 minutes earlier, what they're doing is sleeping right to the bell, and they're going to get in there, and they're going to either kill themselves or get a wreck or just be so stressed out, whereas in fact they could control that. And that in itself is a win. Having a job is a win. Supporting your family is a win. Being a good father is a win. Being a good citizen, helping in the community is a win. Not taking advantage is a win. Don't take it so seriously. We get so caught up and we really get in all these hang-ups that we're really focusing and wondering and worrying about things that we don't need to. Life's really not that complicated, and we don't need to make it that complicated. And when all else fails, remember the 2 rules. Remember, do what's morally and ethically correct and treat everybody as you want to be treated. Now let's look at here, page number 3. All right, now we've talked again about looking at ourselves and what are the things that we can do to improve ourselves? What are the things that we can do to better ourselves? And we already know by bettering ourselves and by bettering our attitude, moving from a negative to a positive, a lot of good positive things start happening. So what we're saying here is that if you look at everything that we talked about, we're looking at all the structure and stuff, and that's what this form here on number 3 is about. It's called the Base Work Center Checkoff. We want you to look at all these other classes that we've had and all these things we've talked about building business infrastructure. Because as you start going in there, because of the 4 barriers, we want you to focus in, but also too, as you're going in there, in effect, it takes a lot of courage. This is what we're trying to reinforce to you now, is that in fact, you have a lot of influence and decision over how you feel and that environment around you, because we really do get out of life what we put into it. And also too, by thinking and dwelling on the negative, we'll attract that and we'll bring that to us. And that's strange how that happens. So we're looking at here is that what can we do to help ourselves? What can we do to make ourselves feel better about who we are? What can we do to be reminding each other to get rid of that negative stuff? Because now if you're looking at as you're going into this organization and you're going into this organizational change, and if you're going, and change is not some radical stuff we're talking about. Change, if nothing else, is just filling out this form. You would not believe what kind of fear that this one form could have, just going into a department and saying, hey, you know, I would like you to take this Base Work Center check off. I would like for you to go through and kind of check off and look at all the way down here. And I'm going to take like the data entry, M. We want you to look at the data entry. Our first question is there a system for that? Well, yeah, we do it no, we're saying we're moving from informal to formal. Is there a system for that? And we're going, chances are it's not. And so we're going, okay, well, let's just mark that down. You would not believe what we start doing to ourselves. We start beating ourselves up, and because we don't trust, we're wondering why they're coming in there to look at defining the system. So we're asking you to use this form, but we're also, as an organization, we're asking you to lead by an example, and as an individual to lead by an example. And basically here, as we're going through and formalizing how we're doing business, whether you do this at work or not, in regards to formalizing structure, what we have learned here is that we'll be able to apply to our personal lives. And not only that, but all these skills that we're doing are transferable skills. And what we've discovered now is that once you learn this stuff, you don't forget it. It becomes a part of you. So no matter what organization you go to, what department, what job, these base skills will stay with you all the way through. We're looking at, the next one is at the manage, plan, schedule, and monitor. We're looking at the process and steps. We're looking at the procedure, additional duties. How do the 4 barriers to quality do that? So as a manager or as an individual, look at it. We're going to give you some audits, some forms, some things now to go back in and look at it. And even on an individual case, you'll be able to go back through and look at what you're going to see is a very informal organization. And if you look at it, that's why we're kind of putting out fires and stuff. So by going in and doing that audit, what it's going to do is also give you some direction of improvement. And I had mentioned earlier that friend of mine, Jim, that they got started in a TQM thing years ago. And he goes, Bruce, it was called process improvement. And he goes, they assumed we had a written process. And that's what I discovered as I was out there. A lot of us don't have the written process. That's why we're saying we have to define how we're doing business before we can improve it. But by defining the business, we are defining the systems, we do improve it because we're having to come to an agreement on it. So now, if we're sitting there defining that system, coming to an agreement on it, in effect, we are improving it. Now, once we have it defined, now we can continuously improve it and work through it. This is where we need to focus in the organization individually and as an organization on the processes and how we're doing business and how we're providing that product and service. If you look at number 4, it says the company held accountable for quality. And the life lesson, and that was kind of the life lesson is what good for the goose is sometimes hard to swallow for the gander. And I remember when we were looking at getting the book published, they didn't want us to put it in there because they said it didn't sound sophisticated enough. And what was interesting, the company or the situation that we're talking about was one that was saying, hey, you're a dealer of mine, you need to be of quality. So what happened was we ended up getting involved and doing some quality stuff and starting to define our processes and doing all that. Then what we discovered is a reason a lot of the mess is the things we were getting from, that we were a dealer from, that company, weren't meeting their terms and conditions. So in effect, all of a sudden, we were told that we were not doing quality down here. We started getting a handle on it. Then we started looking up and going, hey, we need quality coming down the pike, and here's what we need. And what was interesting, they go, hey, you're the one with the problem. And in fact, it was amazing. You could see it start happening, is that once the company started being held accountable for quality, what they did, they dropped their quality program. All of a sudden, that was it. Because now they were being held accountable, and they didn't know what to do, so they just stopped it. Because we got some folks angry in here because of the fear and because they didn't have the process. They just dropped their program, done spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. So this story here is that the company held accountable for quality, meaning what's good for the goose is sometimes hard. It's easy to point fingers at you and tell you to be quality. It's easy to point fingers. What we're saying is that we need to be looking at ourselves. And if we're telling someone else, we need to be walking that walk too. And we need to hold each other accountable for quality. And we have to take that leadership role. Now let's look at the next story. It's called Taking Off the Gloves. This is an example that we talk about with the smile. And that is, a smile in the morning improves life every day. And we're saying as, the life lesson, the gloves of quality and change are worn by the hands of integrity and trust, because that's the only way change is going to happen. And it was interesting when we were boys, we'd be boxing at the boys club when we were little, And one of the things that we'd do, we'd go across town over there to Crichton, and we'd be over there fighting. And after the match, they'd make us take the gloves off and go over and shake their hands. And so what this was, I was sitting in a boardroom with all these folks around, and what was happening, we were focusing in on a particular problem. And we never spent any time on fixing the problem. I saw it, this was really kind of one of my first experiences of putting an issue on the table, and it just looks like a hockey puck being knocked around from one person to the next in one department, and everybody is passing blame, everybody's defending, everybody's justifying, and that 1 hour meeting went for like 3 hours, and we never spent 1 minute on what do we do to fix it. And so being kind of young and trying to figure this out, and I was in this big environment, I'm going, why did we do that? That's where when we started developing the 4 barriers to quality. And what I realize now, the reason they were doing that is because it was fear. Because if I say, yeah, that's my deal, then our first question is, why are we trying to blame anybody anyway? Why don't we fix it? Why don't we turn that time around and focus in on something positive to fix it? But look at it, how we bat it around. And when there's fear, we're going to defend and justify the thing. This is where we were talking about, and kind of out of that evolved a quality issue. And that is that we don't care who did it. Here's the issue. This is what we got to do, and this is what we have to do to fix it. So if you look at it, I think I got my personal reward like 4 or 5 years later with this one big company we were doing. We went back, and I was asked to come to one of our quality issue meetings. I hadn't been there at the company for a couple of years, and I happened to be in town. And I went to the quality issue meeting. It happened to be at 4:30 in the morning because we had a pretty big shift going on. So we went in there, and here was one of our hardline managers that basically grew through the organization, had to quit school when he was in the 8th or 9th grade. And what he did, he had to go to work to support his family, and he had 8 brothers and sisters. And what happened was, Vic, as he grew up, he didn't have any skills, interpersonal skills, because from his neighborhood in LA, how in the world that they did is that's one of my first looks at how do we address conflict. Either we don't or with conflict. So what happened was, Vic learned it all. He'd get up there and he'd get right back in everybody's face. When I got there, they were talking about basically what a mean guy he was. And what was interesting, I always ask, I said, what's his absenteeism or his tardiness? They said, well, he ain't missed a day and he ain't taken a vacation in 15 years. Vic is now retired. I think it was like 35. I think he'd been with the company 35 years. And what happened is that I saw this change in Vic by the organization committing to its people and giving these base skills to where we were in that meeting, and Vic was one of them. We had one of the owners of the company, and we had the one the drivers reported to, and then we had Vic, that guy, that supervisor reported to Vic. And what happened was, they wrote a quality issue. They wrote 2. They wrote one, and then they wrote another one because they didn't address it within the 24 hours. So what happened, they wrote it on the owner of the company. And what was so just exciting, we're sitting there, they wrote it on them, and all 3 of these, and especially Vic, was leading the way saying, it was my fault. But what happened was, we had relieved the fear internally within the organization. Vic had gained skills because Vic was already a good person. He just needed some skills to where they're accepting this, the blame, or they're accepting the quality issue, and they're going, what do we got to do to fix it? And it was just awesome to sit there and see how those folks had progressed with some base skills. And this is what we're talking about here internally within the organization, is that with these base skills, with these affirmations of something as simple as taking off the gloves or being a good neighbor, these are the things that we have to continually reinforce in our organization. You cannot spend enough time doing that. So let's turn now to the next page, which is page number 7. We're looking at here, it's called a daily reinforcement audit. Now, we've got some things there that is positive and acceptable. If you look at the middle column, we're talking there about daily reinforcement, action and event. We're looking at it's kind of like our upper and lower control limits. We're saying in here is kind of acceptable. We start at the middle. Every day, we're in a constant battle of doing what's right. It's not like I walk out and take a pill and all of a sudden I'm this real nice guy. Every day in the world, every day that we get up, we're challenged to keep on that line, to do the right thing. We're saying here, no one's perfect. And what's going to happen? We're going to have this kind of little area that we're looking at here, that no matter we fall off the line, we can either go to the positive side or the negative side. But there's going to be certain things that are acceptable, meaning I can be a little negative. It's still within reason. It's not necessarily, I made a comment, let's say, and I've been guilty of this before. I made a comment to somebody and it was negative. And then we're saying that thing goes to the right. So I was not balanced that minute. I went over here and did a negative. So we're saying here, you can mark that thing. This would be an interesting thing daily just to write down some of these things that are happening at work or happening at home or during the week of this reinforcement. Is look at how many times you're doing something positive or how many times you're doing something negative. Or let's turn it around and let's make an affirmation thing on this. And that is write down some things that you want to do positive or you want to reinforce yourself with. Because remember, this is how we're going to learn. We have to continually have it in front of us. We have to continually go over it. And what's interesting, it's like us going to a seminar. We can go to 1,000 different seminars and get 1,000 different pages and 1,000 different things to do, but if we're not following up on it, we're not understanding it, we're not applying it, it's no good. This is maybe something that we could work on, is write down even some positive affirmations. And even in the morning, whatever, and have that thing around to where you can look at it, or have it in the car, or have it at the desk. And there's probably some folks out there a little better on the computer than I am. Maybe put that bad boy on your screen up there. When you come up in the morning, it helps reinforce those things that are positive that you want to focus on. So we're saying here is that if you go from 1 to 5 on a positive side of that balance, that means, example, you've done a good deed, or you had someone came in and made a wisecrack or accused you or something, you bit your tongue, you went back and fixed it, and you didn't go and get in their face. We're saying, let's give that one a 5. So let's say I didn't get back in that dude's face. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give me 5. So what we're looking at there is that we can look at seeing how we're acting and interacting daily. And if you look at that, and so in the other way, if we were doing it, and it was a negative, I got back into their face, even though let's say they deserved it, we'll give you a 3 on that. So if you look at this, what we want to do is that we can write this down as an affirmation, do it daily, do it whenever we want to, and then we can kind of chalk up and see how we're doing every day. And you can keep it at the house, keep it at work, or whatever. But here's a way to reinforce it. Okay, so that's that daily reinforcement audit. And I'd really like for y'all to kind of put some things down and think about it, and even at work. And I'd kind of lean toward looking at some positive affirmations, some things that you've been struggling with, or that some things that we've talked about that you're kind of identifying with, and put those down and let's get started with that. And don't make it a big deal. Don't say I got to do 500 affirmations a month. If you do one affirmation a month for the rest of your life, that'll have an impact. Because it's really interesting. We're talking about how these things creep in, and all of a sudden they're a part of us. And we were talking earlier, it's almost like gaining weight. Well, I'm only gaining a pound a year, but after 25 years, it kind of adds up, doesn't it? That's the same thing of what we're talking about, this negative rap. That's the same thing we're talking about, the 4 barriers to quality. It all adds up. And it's so gradual, we don't realize it. We're asking us to step back and look at those things, look at what we can do, and go in a positive direction. Next is, number 8, is the 4 barriers to quality survey. What we would like for you to do, and you've seen this survey in our classes. Remember, these classes are designed to keep separate. What I don't like is that before, when I was in some other stuff and we were trying to define some training, we reference back to other stuff. Well, that gets so darn confusing. So that's why we kind of put all this stuff. This would be actually something you could go and talk to your people about and focus on, and you got everything there to make that decision. So we would like for you to look at doing the 4 barriers to quality survey. I think you'd be really interested in seeing what happened. Next is my base work center quality issue rating. Here's another thing that we can do. Go through the organization, go through my job, go through my department, and go down and say, okay, how do I rate these things? 1 to 5. And then make you some comments. Why are we rating it like that? Again, I'm going to tell you already what you're going to see. It's so informal, it ain't even funny, and it's pretty consistent. Most of us aren't formal in an organization. Number 10 is corporate citizenship. This was the one that was put out by the Department of Labor. So that would be an interesting one for your organization to look at. And as we said the other day, I wonder if some of the boys in our government are listening to that survey that they put out. I'd like for you now to go to our frequently asked questions and our thoughts. Is that, why do you say I can either be positive or negative? It's my decision. That's how much control that you do have. The control you have of how you feel, whether you're positive or negative, is totally up to you. But we have to get our mind set, and either it's in positive affirmations, conscious of it, and do whatever we have to do to take from a negative to a positive. Is that it was interesting that I really stepped back and looked at when someone told me that I could either have a good day or bad day. As I said earlier, they didn't necessarily say it in that terms, and I thought they were ridiculous. I was one of those guys. In fact, I think at the time I was building inlets, concrete finisher out of high school, and I was sitting there, somebody was telling me about this positive stuff, they had got a book. I go, that's a bunch of bull. So what happened was he actually got me a book, and I started kind of reading it. And I started trying to apply it. Basically, I started trying to apply it to show him that he was wrong. And it was interesting. I did just what the book said. I took that advice and made it a part. And it did change, and it did have an impact. So if you look at, you really have the power. You can make that decision that you can either have a good life, a bad life, a positive life, or a negative life, or move from one tragedy to the next, or move from one purpose, one goal, one success to the next. It's totally up to you, because externally, where we're trying to get satisfaction or trying to get something, we need to look in here first. And it says, number 2, what is the responsibility of convenience? What we have talked about before, the responsibility of convenience is that when it's a problem, I give it to you. What we're saying is, let's define those base work centers and let them have ownership of it, and they will be more accountable, more responsible than we could ever dictate. if 99% want to be accountable, why aren't they? We're saying that they do want to be held accountable, because it's really frustrating, because I go into a lot of organizations and the managers are going, they don't want to be accountable. They do want to be accountable. As frustrated as the managers are the co-workers of the folks that are kind of scamming and getting by internally within the organization. I'm saying the reason that that thing is happening, or it's in a negative mode, that we feel like people don't want to be held accountable, has a little to do with that accountability of convenience. Also, too, it has to do with the 4 barriers to quality and the informal organizational structure. Because what in the world are you going to manage, plan, schedule, and monitor? There ain't nothing there to do that. Next, let's look at, how about the 1%? You know, we've talked about them, and we're not going to touch much more on them, because that's enough to suck all the enthusiasm out of you, is that if you look at the 1%, those folks are going to take care of themselves. You will never be able to make that 1% happy. So I'm asking you to turn and focus on your 99% of the folks that are doing it right. That 1% will take care of themselves. All they're doing is just sucking the energy, life, and enthusiasm out of you and that organization. If you're looking at number 5, which we talk about the smile, remember, a smile starts setting the tone. The smile is a good way to think about that. It will start lighting you up and moving you to a positive manner. So if you think about the smile, and/or smile in the morning improves life every day. We also want you to think about getting up in the morning and being positive, having a smile for your spouse. Let's look at, do the 4 barriers to quality affect all companies? You know, it's really interesting, because every company I go to, say their industry or their business is different, and it won't work here, it won't do this. And what we're saying here is that all organizations are affected on it. Even the ones that we're currently in and been in for 10 years. It's a constant deal. It's not like something you do for one day or one quarter. Is that you continually do it. It becomes a part of your culture on how you're doing business. This is what we're talking about here. What you have learned here, and what you will learn in this 30 hours, you could literally take back and apply to your organization from here on out. You won't need to do nothing else but focus on your people and your processes. We even gave you the systems in there to help lead you to go into that direction. We've also given you everything there to support that. We've also looked at it and gained an awareness of why we have to focus on our people and process, why we have to give the base work centers for success internally within that organization for continuance and growth. And I think we've talked about how the 4 barriers are interacting with us daily. So if you look at, we want you to kind of, again, bring it together. We've been talking about process for a lot of hours now. Now let's start putting some positive stuff in there to where we can move this thing forward. And then what we'd like to do is see you at our next workshop, and we really want you to think about the control that you have over your life and the influence you have, not only on yourself, but for those folks around you. And more so than that, the influence that you have on your kids. Thanks, and have a good day, and we'll see you at our next class.